Okay, Stephen, looked like somebody else tried to join and then fell off. We'll give it till, oh, I see we got 2 minutes till 1 o'clock, so we'll hold off.
Hello, Rabbi. How are you?
Hi. Sorry for the hand sign. I just was to unmute myself. Good. Well, nice to see you, Jim. Okay. I've put the screen up. I think we got 1 minute to go, so I'll just hang in there, and we'll get started as soon as we reach the top of the hour. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Can you just thumbs up to confirm you can see the screen? Okay, so we're learning about the laws of red heifer. Obviously, these laws come after the laws that we dealt with previously, the laws of relating to impurity that comes from contact with a corpse or dead body, and ultimately the ashes of the red heifer, which we're going to learn about today, exactly how it was prepared, becomes the method through which one can relieve themselves of that impurity. Okay, so we've been introduced basically to the mitzvah, to the nature of that particular cow that was used, what would constitute a pure red cow, as it were, for this purpose. And today, as mentioned, we're going to look at now the procedure, exactly how it was prepared. Okay, so beginning right away with the first halakha, Paraduma, chapter 3, the red heifer should be burnt only outside the temple mount, okay, as the pasuk says, and you shall take it outside the camp. This was not prepared in the Beit HaMikdash, but outside. Practically speaking, where did they do this? They would burn it on the Mount of Olives. And we're going to see that there was a process, a procedure, and there was unique things that had to be put into place in order to enable this. David, welcome. Glad you're back on.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. And okay, so this is how it would happen. A ramp was built from the Temple Mount to the Mount of Olives. Below it were arches upon arches. Now, what's happening over here? We've been learning about the laws of impurity that comes from a corpse. We've learned that if there is a corpse or a part of a corpse that was buried, the impurity that is emitted from it can emit upwards all the way, as the expression was, all the way to the heavens. Now, anybody that's part of the procedure of preparing the ashes for the red heifer and the animal itself could not come into contact with that type of ritual impurity. So they had to create a way for the people that were going to be participating in preparing the red heifer to get from the Temple Mount to off the Temple Mount, because now the preparation had to take place off the Temple Mount. You had to get there in a way that it was completely possible to arrive with certainty that you had not become ritually impure from contact, even inadvertently, with a dead body. So they had to build this ramp, and under the ramp were arches. Now, in order to ensure that there was no spot on the ramp itself that could possibly be a conduit for ritual impurity, you had to make sure that it wasn't just one arch, but you had arches on top of arches. So that the two, as he explains over here, meaning an arch on two arches, so that there would be empty space under it. So you'd have two arches, 1, 2, and then one above it, so that the spot where those first two arches met, which technically allows for a space for impurity to be emitted upwards, would also then be covered or with an opening that would stop the flow or the emission of this impurity. Okay, you following? So that's how the ramp was built. Arches on top of arches. Lest, as he says, lest there be a grave in the depths of the earth. Similarly, the place where the heifer was burnt and the place of immersion on the Mount of Olives had the space under them hollowed, lest there be a grave in the depths of the earth. So they're going to go to the Mount of Olives, where they're going to have to build a bonfire, as we'll see, to burn the cow. The Kohen is going to have to go into a mikveh there. Those things also were built above a hollow, so that if there was any corpses deep below in the earth, it would not, the ritual impurity would not extend above those hollows. Okay, so now you built the bridge, and he goes on. The red heifer, the one who burnt it, and all those who assisted in its burning go from the Temple Mount to the Mount of Olives on this ramp. And we'll see that they weren't the first to go. So let's go through exactly. We're going to go now in detail exactly how this procedure took place. How was the red heifer burnt? The elders of Israel would walk to the Mount of Olives first. They went ahead. There was a mikveh there. The priest, those assisting in burning, and the heifer itself, the cow itself, would then go on the ramp and come to the Mount of Olives, where they would be received by the elders there. Now, this is an important point and something that we referenced yesterday. There, they would make the priest impure. I won't test you, so I'll just repeat what the principle was yesterday. We had amongst the Jewish people those who, professed a belief in the written Torah, but denied the oral tradition. Now, we know that the law around preparing the red heifer is that a Kohen who had become ritually impure and then gone to mikvah, it's what we call a tful yom, he's gone to mikvah on that day, even though he has not yet waited for the sun to set, such a Kohen would be allowed to participate in the preparation of the red heifer. Many, many areas of ritual impurity, there are many times when you need to have when a tful yom has to wait till Har of Shimshon, until the sun is set, until they're considered completely pure. We've had examples of this previously. And the tzidukim, those who claimed that denied the rabbinic law, wanted to suggest that that was also required for the individual preparing the red heifer. So as we learned yesterday, what we did is, as he's going to explain over here, they would make the priest impure. So they would touch him, let's say, with a rodent, a dead rodent or something, to make him impure. And then they would place their hands on the priest and they would tell him, immerse yourself. If the particular priest was the high priest, they would use a title. They would say, Masur, or in Hebrew, Ishi Kohen Gadol. Masur, the high priest, immerse yourself. The Kohen would then descend, immerse himself, come out, dry himself, and he would be fully prepared, ready to go and prepare the red heifer. And what the Chachamim were, and the Zakanim, the elders, were making a point of, is to enforce the oral tradition and the rabbinic law, that we should not allow this idea that only someone who had waited for the sun to set would be able to prepare the para aduma, as the tzidukim suggested. So they would do this to make this point. Okay, now there was wood arranged there. So there was a whole bunch of wood there. There was cedar wood, there was oak wood, there was pine wood, and then there was smooth fig wood. And they would take those wood and they would make an arrangement like a tower. So, a bonfire, kind of. Wood on top of each other with windows, with spaces, so that air could flow through it to fan the flames that you would be lighting. Now, the front of the arrangement was in the west, meaning facing towards where the temple was. That would be the biggest opening, I guess, where you'll see soon, is where they would put in the kindling wood with the flames to start the fire. The heifer would be tied with a rope of love grass, so it was a material that could not be susceptible itself to tumah, because remember, this cow has to be protected from any types of ritual impurity. And then it would be brought onto this arrangement with its head to the south and its face to the west. So what's apparent is that it would be lying down. And then the Kohen, the one who's there to repair it, the priest would stand on the east with his head facing west also. And then he would shech the heifer with his right hand, and he would receive the blood with his left hand. unlike the korbanot that were prepared in the temple itself, where there was always a vessel to catch the blood, here the Kohen himself would cup his hand to catch the blood that was emerging as he slaughtered the animal. And then with his right finger, he would sprinkle from the blood that's in his left hand 7 times towards the Holy of Holies. And he would dip his finger in the blood for every sprinkling. As he couldn't keep going, he had to one dip, one sprinkle. And the remainder of the blood in his finger was disqualified from sprinkling. Now, there certainly would have been a remainder. So what does he do? Therefore, after every sprinkling, he would clean his finger on the body of the heifer. Dip, sprinkle, wipe. So there was nothing left over to invalidate the second sprinkle. When he completed sprinkling, so he's dipped 7 times, sprinkled 7 times. Now, of course, his left hand would still have a bunch of residual blood left there, and even his right hand would still have. So he would clean his hands on the body of the cow and then move down from this arrangement of wood. And the reason why he had to wipe his hand on the cow was because every part had to be consumed in the fire that they were about to burn. So he couldn't wipe it on a rag and chuck it out. It had to be wiped on the cow so that any blood that came off would be part of this arrangement of the fire and be burnt together. So he would light the fire with small kindling twigs and then place them below the wood arrangement. The fire would begin to catch in it. He would stand back at a distance, watch until the fire, really took, until a large portion of the animal was aflame and its belly would rip open. So it's a little bit gross, I guess, but I guess that's what would happen. Once the animal became overheated and the flames were consuming it, it would actually, I guess, kind of explode to some degree. Afterwards, so now he would take a branch of cedar and hyssop. These are the other ingredients, right, that the Torah instructs must be part of the ashes. And at least a handbreadth long of wool dyed crimson, altogether weighing 5 selaim. Okay? And then he would turn to the people around him and he would take the piece of cedar. Is this a piece of cedar? Is this a piece of cedar? Is this a piece of cedar? He would then take the next product, the hyssop, and he'd say, is this hyssop? Is this hyssop? Is this hyssop? Each one 3 times. Is this a crimson thread? Is this a crimson thread? Is this a crimson thread? Each time he would ask, then they would respond, yes, 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 3 times for each of the questions. In other words, so Rambam says, why was this all necessary? Why do you have to show the cedar? Why do you have to ask them 3 times? Why do you have to show the hyssop, ask them 3 times? He says, because there are 7 species of cedar, 4 species of hyssop, and several options to produce a red dye for this wool. Some dye with maida, some dye with lacquer sap, some dye with tolat. And tolat is the one that we need. And this refers to red berries that resemble carob seeds. And they are like sumac berries. I'm not familiar exactly what these different types are, but that's what we needed. And why is it called tolat? Tolat in Hebrew means like a worm. So why were these berries called tolat? Because there was always like a little bug inside each of these seeds, like a gnat in every single berry. Now, because we've just said there are different types of species for each of these entities, so the priest had to notify and inform them that these are the ones that are mentioned in the Torah, and they would confirm it by responding yes. The hyssop mentioned in the Torah is the type of hyssop eaten by homeowners and used as a condiment in certain dishes. The hyssop, now, the cedar, and the wool dyed crimson are all absolute requirements. Without one of them, the other are not acceptable. You need all the ingredients. First the cow, and then these 3 things. The priest should bind the hyssop together with the cedar branch, with the crimson thread, and then throw them into the belly of the cow, right? We said that it had opened. That's where he would place it. And this is what the pasuk means when it says, the verse in the Torah, he shall cast them into the midst of the conflagration of the heifer. In other words, when it's burning up, he should place it into it. And what the Rambam is going to specify here is from the phrase in the pasuk, it becomes clear that he should not cast them into the heifer until the fire has caught hold of a large portion of it, and not after it has been reduced to ashes. So don't throw it in too early and don't throw it in too late. If you cast them in at those times, too early or too late, it's unacceptable, as indicated by the verse, into the midst of the conflagration. It has to be thrown into the cow as it's burning up, meaning not before the fire is caught onto its larger portion and not after it was reduced to ashes. Now, whether one, see how there's a little bit, so we've just learned the ideal way is to take the 2 branches and bind them and then put it in all together. There's a slight leniency, whether one casts all 3 of them together, which is the ideal, or one after the other, whether one casts them into the heifer's body or just into the fire, whether it's barely burst open on its own accord, or the priest ripped it open by hand or with a utensil. In all these situations, it is acceptable. So those are small details, but the ingredients themselves are essential. Can't do without any of them, and the timing is essential. But the order is there's a bit of leeway there. The third halacha, when the process of burning it has been completed. So now the flames have died down, and its remnants and all the pieces of wood in its arrangement that were burnt. What do you do with it? Then you beat all that down with clubs, and then you rake it all together. Anything, whether from its flesh or from the wood, that has been blackened and it's possible to be crushed and reduced into ash, that must be crushed and reduced into ash. If something has no trace of ash in it, you just leave it. In other words, if there's a piece of flesh for some reason that didn't actually char up and you can't crush it into ash, that you leave. That would be for the wood or the flesh. But any piece of bone that remains from the heifer's bones, if it hadn't burned completely, that must be crushed regardless and put into this mixture. So now you have that ash. What do you do with the ash? None of the ash is brought into the temple courtyard itself for storage, because as the pasuk says, he shall place it outside the camp. Where exactly out? And the camp here refers to the actual temple complex. So how was this now? Where was it placed? The ashes were divided into three portions. One was placed in the chel. So on the Temple Mount, you had the actual temple complex, which was in the walls of the temple. And then you had an outer area which was cordoned off with a fence that was called the chel. That whole area between that fence and the actual temple wall is called the chel. So one portion out of this prepared ashes was put aside somewhere in the chel. It was hidden. One of them was kept on the Mount of Olives. And then the third portion was then subdivided 24 times. It was divided among all the priestly guard posts. Right? The priests were divided into families of 24 groupings, because they would rotate their servicing of the base in the Beis Hamikdash. So that third portion was subdivided into 24. The one that was divided among all the priestly watchers was used by the priests to sanctify themselves for that family when they needed to go through the process of ritual purification from coming into contact with the dead. They would use the portion that was given to their God, their family. The one that was placed in the Mount of Olives was used by the entire Jewish people for sprinkling when a regular person needed to come, but had to go through the process of relieving themselves of the tumah. And the one that was placed in the chel was prepared and hidden away, as implied by that pasuk that we quoted, which says, and it will be a security for the congregation of Israel. This teaches that it was put away for safekeeping. It's a backup, as it were. Indeed, in the chel, they were put away for safekeeping a portion of the ashes from every red heifer that was burnt. And here the Rambam tells us something interesting. From the time that the first red heifer was prepared, 9 red heifers were offered from the time that they were commanded to fulfill this mitzvah until the time when the temple was destroyed for a second time, the second Beit HaMikdash. The first was brought by Moshe, the second brought by Ezra. That's quite amazing, because Ezra was already after the destruction of the first temple. So that first lot lasted a long time. So you had another 8 from Ezra through the period of the second temple. And Ezra was the first one, and 7 others were offered until the destruction of the second temple. And here the Rambam concludes, and the 10th will be brought by the King Mashiach. And here the Rambam concludes with a relatively surprising expression. He says, right? He says, and the 10th will be brought by the King Mashiach. May he speedily be revealed. Amen. Ken Yehi Ratzon. So the Rebbe once quoted this Rambam or discussed this Rambam and noted something interesting. The Rambam himself makes it clear at the outset of the work that this is strictly a book of halakha. So it seems out of place that the Rambam is expressing here a wish and a prayer. The Mashiach will come, will prepare the 10th red heifer, Amen Ken Yehi Ratzon, which is a prayer. So the Rebbe explains that, well, actually, if we follow the Rambam's thinking and how he's presented the foundational core beliefs of Yiddishkeit, one of the beliefs is in the coming of Mashiach. And not just the coming of Mashiach, but awaiting Mashiach. So what we see here is very instructive. That as soon as the Rambam mentions Mashiach, immediately he expresses the desire and the prayer for that to be manifest. And it's instructive in that what the Rambam is teaching us a new halakha, that part of awaiting Mashiach is every time we acknowledge it, is that we note that, and secondly, we actually add our own prayer. because awaiting means actually we'll do what we can to make it happen, as it were. So we read this together with the Rambam, and indeed that's what we're doing. We're participating in another mitzvah, as it were, because we're referring to Mashiach, and we express that wish that Hashem, the reveal Mashiach should be revealed speedily, and Amen Ken Yeh Ratzon, and we can respond Amen. Amen Ken Yeh Ratzon. Okay, let's quickly go through the questions.
Before we go to the quiz, just
Sure.
quick questions, please. Okay, so earlier on we talked about, I think it's the hyssop having a bug in it. And why would that not cause an impurity? Normally that sort of thing would cause an impurity.
Yeah, so so just to clarify, not the hyssop didn't have the bug, the berry from which they extracted the dye for the wool.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
As to why that doesn't have impurities, of course it's just the dyed wool, not the actual berry that we're bringing, and I assume that that bug would have been removed before it was used.
Okay, they didn't say so, just normally he's very specific.
That's a fair question. I'm not sure 100%. I have to assume that's what happened.
Okay, and the second question is that the quantum of ashes that can be made. As I'd understood it, that the ashes, once they were made, were actually mixed with water. I don't know what sort of proportion. It's quite possible it was a lot of water with a little amount of ash, because this was used almost daily to purify things. So it seems to me that almost needs to be diluted to an enormous extent to be able to carry on for hundreds of years. I mean, it just seems unlikely.
Yeah, it must have been. I mean, I guess, a small amount must have created a large amount of sprinkling water.
Yeah.
Because as you correctly say, eventually it was, whatever the ratio was, they made it work. They made it last. Yeah.
Rabbi,
Yes.
did the Rambam ever go to Eretz Yisrael?
The Rambam did go to Eretz Yisrael. The Rambam is buried in Eretz Yisrael. Although there's different versions of exactly how he ended up there.
Did he go to be buried, or did he go?
Yeah, he went to be buried.
Okay.
And it might have been after his life.
Yeah, as I recall, he never lived in Israel, because he in fact accused himself of actually not carrying out that mitzvah.
No, it wasn't so much that he refused himself the mitzvah. The Rambam always signed his name as the individual who every day is transgressing a biblical command.
Yeah.
By living in Egypt, at least for the period that he was living in Egypt. Because there's a mitzvah that says we should not return to Egypt. There are different ways of understanding that mitzvah, but the Rambam clearly felt that to some degree it was not ideal that he should be there. Obviously, circumstances required him to be there. But nonetheless, it was not ideal. And on some degree, it was transgressing that mitzvah in his view.
One more question. What was the time span between the first and the 9th red heifer years?
So it's about 1,500 years.
Okay, thank you.
Right? No, it's...
Is it not more?
It's more than that. It's more than that. Close to 2,000 years. It was close 1,000. No, 1 second.
More sure.
No, between 1,500 and 2,000. I forget exactly. Yeah, but between 1,500 and 2,000 years.
Thank you.
Okay. It was the first. Yeah. Basically, the first Beis HaMikdash stood for 410 years. The second Beis HaMikdash stood for 420 years. You had 70 years in between. And I forget the exact years from Moshe till the first temple was built, but it's about between 500-700 years, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah. So it's about just over 1,500 years then, right?
Thank you.
Or between 1,500 and 2,000, yeah. Work out, do the math. Okay, let's do the quiz. Now that we've had enough time to forget what we just learned, so this will be a real test of our memory. Okay. So first question is, where is the red heifer burned? On the Mount of Olives, in Tiberias, or in the temple courtyard?
Mount of Olives.
Okay, correct.
Yeah, Mount of Olives. Yeah.
Second question, what is done with the branch of the cedar, the hyssop, and the crimson thread of wool? We've got three options. The hyssop and branch of cedar are tied together with the thread and thrown into the fire. Option 1. Option 2, the hyssop and the branch of cedar are tied together with a thread and are used to stir the blood of the red heifer before it is burnt. Option 3, the hyssop plants are tied together and with the thread and thrown into the fire, and the cedar branch is used to stir the blood.
No,
I think
I
number
think
one.
number one. Number one.
One is correct, right? The two woods are put together and thrown in the fire. Number 3, which of the following places was not a place where they would restore the ashes of the red heifer? The Chel, the temple courtyard, or the Mount of Olives? So we're looking for the one that's not used.
Temple courtyard.
Temple courtyard.
Temple courtyard, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Correct. And a final question, how many red heifers have been burned so far throughout our history? 9.
Nine.
9.
9. Yeah, 9.
9. Yes, definitely.
Okay, excellent. So there we go.
Yeah.
4 winners today. 4 out of 4.
Thanks,
Thank
Rabbi.
you. Thank you,
Wonderful.
Rabbi.
Have a beautiful day forward,
Bye
and
to all.
much younger news. See you next week.